Takes in Football. I am your host, Bad Takes. Excited to get into Week 4's matchups, what happened in those Sunday slated games, as well as a Monday Night Football preview. We got 2 games tonight, so we'll make sure to go through those. While we're waiting for some people to join, make sure you hit that subscribe button. As you can see, I'm on my road to my first 100 subscribers. It really helps me out, and it's free for you to do. I'm also going to be doing a giveaway to one of those subscribers. It's going to be a portable Bluetooth speaker that can be broken into 2 different speakers, so you have that sort of surround sound feel to it. So it should be a really exciting gift. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to like and comment on this video. Tell me what you thought about this week's slate of games. Which team seems to be in the most trouble? I prompted that question in chat. To me, it seems to be the Ravens. We'll get more into that. But again, as people are filing in, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Again, we'll get started shortly. A lot of crazy games happened yesterday. We'll definitely dive into all of those. And again, we'll also be talking about a Monday Night Football preview as well. All right, like I said, let's go ahead and dive into today's show. We will be starting out with a Monday Night Football preview. Then we'll actually dive into what happened in last night's games. So the first game we're actually going to dive into is the New York Jets are traveling to the Miami Dolphins. Now, when you look at this game, you're not excited about this game right off the bat, just purely because, one, you're looking at 2 0-3 teams, right? Both of these teams are struggling, and they're struggling in a really bad way. When it comes to the Jets, you have a team with a brand new head football coach, Aaron Glenn, who is still trying to get his first win as an NFL head coach. And then you also have the Miami Dolphins, who seemingly just have a cohesive issue and just like a team culture issue, in my opinion. I think they have all the weapons. They have the talent. Maybe not as much on the defensive side, but to me, they're just a team that's struggling because they just can't figure out how to work as a team and how to play as a team. There seems to me to be some players that are out there, i.e. Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, that are sort of out there for themselves. Not necessarily the most mature player, and I think it's really impacting this Dolphins team. So, going into this, first things off the bat is the fact that, Justin Fields, he was out last week with a concussion, and he has cleared concussion protocol, so we actually should see Justin Fields out there. And I want to bring that up because I think it's important to mention, again, I'm not too high on this Miami Dolphins defense. I think this Dolphins defense struggles both in the pass and in the run. And so I'm expecting actually a pretty good game from Justin Fields as well as running back Breece Hall. Breece Hall, he's had a couple of up and down games, but to me, this is a game where Breece Hall could probably have over 100 rushing yards, and I expect at least a touchdown out of Breece Hall as well. Now, in the passing game, I think it's important to get Garrett Wilson going in this game. Garrett Wilson, he did just get a contract. And so, for me, he's had one solid game this year already in week 1, but really hasn't been able to do much since. I think a fair amount of that had to do with the fact that Tyrod Taylor was, the starting quarterback last week for the Jets. And so there just didn't have that sort of continuity with him and the timing. But at the same time, again, I think it's important that they really get Garrett Wilson going because, to me, if you're able to be successful in the run and in the pass in this game, especially against this Dolphins defense, I think it's going to be really hard for the Jets to be able to compete. Now, on the other side, I will say, the Jets defense is definitely the strength of the team. And so the Dolphins, again, their strength is their offense. And, I really do expect Tyreek Hill to be, locked down by Sauce Gardner. And if he's not on Tyreek, maybe it's Jalen Waddle. But regardless, whoever Sauce Gardner is matching up against, I expect to have a pretty tough game in this matchup. And so, again, for me, that's why you need that continuity from this Dolphins team, because if you don't have one of those receivers performing at a high level, they've generally struggled in the past. Like their best games are when both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are really going. Now, the other player that I'm also curious to see how he does is Devon Achane for the Miami Dolphins, their running back. Achane to me, he seems to me like, I think the best comparison when it comes to Achane would be, I would say he's like a Darren Sproles on steroids, in the sense that, he's bigger than Darren Sproles, but, he's really used a lot in the passing game along with the run game. You're not expecting, Devon Achane to have that goal line, 2-yard run for a touchdown. That is not, Devon Achane's game. What Devon Achane is good at is being in open space and making tacklers miss, and yards after the catch or yards after contact in the run. That's really what he specializes in. He's a game breaker. He generates big plays, and you never really know when they're coming, but generally he's good for at least one or two breakout plays in a game. And so Devon Achane going up against this really stout Jets defense is going to be a really important matchup. And for me, if Devon Achane is able to be productive in both the run and the pass, I think that's what gives the Dolphins the best chance of winning in this game. Again, I do expect either Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill to be handcuffed by Sauce Gardner. And so you're going to need to have that extra component on the offensive side for the Dolphins if you want to see the Dolphins win this game. When it comes to actually predicting where I see this game going, for me, I do think that the Dolphins actually get this win. I think this will be their first win. I see them getting this win 23-20. And unfortunately for the Jets and Aaron Glenn, I think they're going to have to wait another week in order to get that first victory under their belts. I just don't think that their offense is explosive enough to be able to keep up with the Dolphins' offense. And I do expect the Dolphins' offense to be able to put up points, even though the Jets' defense is pretty stout. The second game on Monday Night Football that we're going to get into is the Bengals versus the Broncos. So the Cincinnati Bengals are traveling to Denver to face off against Bo Nix and this Broncos team. And honestly, the biggest matchup for me is the fact that is going to be, how does Jake Browning handle this Broncos defense and this Broncos defense in a whole, right? I think there's a couple things that you need to look at. One, it's what do they do with Jamar Chase? Because Jamar Chase is this Bengals offense. If Jamar Chase isn't going, yes, they do have T. Higgins, but T. Higgins generally sees most of his success when Jamar Chase is really going, because defenses start to really focus on Jamar Chase, and that's where you see T. Higgins having some breakout plays. And so because this Broncos defense has such a good pass rush, and they also have a really good secondary, I imagine that there's going to be a lot of very short passes to Jamar Chase and even T. Higgins. I think in this game you can expect several screen passes. You can expect a lot of slant routes, really just short passes so that Jake Browning can get the ball out of his hands and not have to worry about Nick Benito coming off the edge and causing turnovers and getting sacks in this game. Because if the Bengals are playing from behind, if they're playing from behind and, they're seeing second and longs and third and longs in this game, there's going to be a lot of trouble for this Bengals offense, because it is an explosive offense, but this Broncos defense is the real deal. They did struggle against the Colts, but I think the Colts have proven that they're actually a really legitimate team in the NFL. I think the Broncos, they went up against the Chargers last week, and they caused a lot of problems for Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert and the Chargers still won that game. But again, I just think that this Broncos defense is one of the tops in the NFL. And again, I expect Nick Benito to be coming after Jake Browning a lot in this game. I think Jake Browning, they struggled a lot against the Vikings, and Jake Browning had a really tough game against the Vikings. He does have another week to prepare as a starter, and so maybe he gets more into the swing of things. but he's having an even tougher matchup this year or this week against the Broncos. I think Patrick Surtain, again, he will be lined up against Jamar Chase. I expect Surtain to follow Jamar Chase wherever he goes on this field. And whoever really wins that matchup, I think, is going to be the winner in this game. Another important aspect is J.K. Dobbins. He's really figured things out in the run game for the Broncos. He's had major injuries in his career. A lot of the times, I think that's why people kind of don't think about J.K. Dobbins or consider him to be a top running back. But so far in this year, he's had a really strong showing. I was looking at his stats. He has 222 yards through 3 games, and he has 3 touchdowns. And he's also catching the ball out of the backfield as well. So that's not even on a lot of carries. That's on 41 carries. So he's averaging 100 yards per 20 carries, essentially, which is right where you want to be. He's actually averaging over that. So again, he's right where he wants to be. And so I expect the Broncos to use J.K. Dobbins very heavily in this game. I think as long as you can keep Jamar Chase and T. Higgins off the field, you're in a winning situation. And so it's a no-brainer for the Broncos to just have a run-heavy, offense in this game. And that's nothing against Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is also played really solid this year, and I think he can really pick apart this Bengals defense as well. I think they could probably win the game either way, but I think just in order to keep the Cincinnati weapons off this field, just control the clock is the best way for this Broncos team to win this game. And I do expect the Broncos to win this game. For me, I see this game not necessarily being out of hand early, but I don't think the Bengals are going to be able to keep up with the Broncos just purely because I don't expect the Bengals offense to be able to play that well against this Broncos defense. So I expect the Broncos to actually win this game 27-16. I think the Bengals are going to be able to get into field goal range a fair amount in this game, but again, it just isn't going to be enough. If somehow Jamar Chase has a career game and he's able to break out and cause some missed tackles from Surtain, maybe it's going to be a different story. But I trust Bo Nix a lot more than I trust Jake Browning, and I'm a huge fan of this Broncos defense, is really what it comes down to. So, what do you guys think about these Monday Night Football games? Is there a matchup you're most excited about in these games? Again, we have an 0-3 versus 0-3 game first, right, with the Jets and the Dolphins. But I do think this Bengals-Broncos game could be an exciting game, whether that's a defensive-minded game or both offenses are humming. We'll see, but I do think this will be a better matchup than most people think. So what do you guys think? And also make sure you subscribe to the channel while you're in here. You can see that subscription goal above me. I'm at 59. I'm trying to get to 100. So every single subscription really helps me out. So please hit that subscribe button. Also make sure to like the stream. It helps people find it. I do these streams every Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. That time is subject to change, though. Just know I will let you know. But right now, it's every Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Generally, Mondays, I'm going over what happened in Sunday night's games or Sunday's games, as well as previewing Monday, talking about different stories that I find interesting that happened. And then also Wednesday is a preview of the Thursday night football game as well as the Sunday games that are coming up. So again, I'm doing these. Make sure you're commenting. Make sure you're in chat. I want this to be as active as possible just because, I want to talk to you. I want this to be banter back and forth. Give me your takes. I'll give you my takes. Let's have a good time in here. That's really the point of this community, is just to be able to talk football and have a good time. All right, if there's no comments or takes that anyone wants to share, I'll go ahead and dive into, what happened in the Sunday slate of games. And, we'll start out with the game that was played in Dublin. So the Minnesota Vikings played against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, again, the difference in this game to me was this Pittsburgh defense. The defense of Pittsburgh, they caused just enough turnovers, in my opinion, in order to make this so that the Vikings could not come back and win this game. The game ended 24-21. The Vikings did have a late spurt in order to make this a closer game than really what it was. But again, for me, Carson Wentz just didn't have the game he needed to have with his turnovers. I think that was the biggest story in this game. Carson Wentz, he did have 350 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, but he did have 2 interceptions. And again, they lost this game 21-24. If you take one of those interceptions away, it's a completely different game. Now on the other side, when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers, he had one really long pass in this game. It was a touchdown, 80-yard touchdown catch from DK Metcalf. Most of it was yards after the catch for DK. The Steelers are 3-1. To me, they are not a 3-1 team, though. They're finding ways to win games, but I just don't know how much this offense can really keep it up and how much their defense can continue to make up for the lack of explosiveness in this Pittsburgh offense. If you take away that 80-yard catch from DK Metcalf, again, most of it was yards after the catch, you're looking at 120 yards for Aaron Rodgers in this game, and he wouldn't have a touchdown either. He had 200 yards in this game, and so he would have 120 yards passing if it wasn't for that long play. Their rushing game, I will say Kenneth Gainwell, I didn't expect him to have the game he had. Jalen Warren didn't play in this game, and so Kenneth Gainwell, I was not expecting to have a 99-yard rushing game. That, again, I would say is a pretty big difference, and probably what made the difference in this game is the fact that the Steelers were actually able to run the ball successfully in this game. They really hadn't up until this week. Jalen Warren was actually the top receiver for the Steelers the prior 3 weeks, and so not having him out there, I thought that was going to be a huge issue for the Steelers offense. I just didn't expect them to be able to put up the points. Again, their offense is very streaky. More often than not, it's not productive, right? Again, most of their points or most of their yards, at least in the air, came from one play. It was an 80-yard reception for a touchdown. Their next highest receiver was Kenneth Gainwell with 35 yards after, DK Metcalf did have 126 yards and again a touchdown, but again 80 of that 126 yards was on one play. The other interesting aspect to this is the Steelers defense, they are getting to the quarterback, right? They had 6 sacks in this game. That was definitely a huge differentiating factor in this game for me as well. And again, Carson Wentz, he did have a pretty solid game. He sometimes he just holds on to the ball way too much. I've heard this joked about with him so many times. He is a very tough quarterback. He's dealt with a lot of ankle injuries, especially, but he's been hit a lot in the ribs. He's had different sort of rib issues, shoulder issues, you name it, all from like hits. And again, sometimes it's nice when you have a quarterback that's willing to sit back there and take those hits. But if you're getting sacked 6 times, you have to be able to get rid of the ball faster. There were several times in this game where there was an open guy. It would have been a dump down pass, but instead of taking a 3, 4, 5, 6 yard loss, it could have been a gain of 1, 2, 3, 4 yards. Maybe they break a tackle and make it even further. So I think that's something that's going to be a factor for Minnesota moving forward. I think another thing we have to talk about when it comes to the Vikings is, did Carson Wentz prove at all that he deserves to be the starter for this team when J.J. McCarthy is healthy? Because, J.J. McCarthy, in all honesty, has had really just like one really solid quarter in the games that he's played. It's not like J.J. McCarthy is blowing, the stats out of the water when it comes to his gameplay. He hasn't done anything like extraordinary by any means. So if Carson Wentz is being able to get the ball down the field, again, he is making mistakes. Like, do you consider even think about not playing JJ McCarthy and continuing to have Carson Wentz be that starter? For me, I would say it's not worth it. I think you need to continue to develop JJ McCarthy and get him in real game time snaps and getting him that experience. I don't think Carson Wentz has proven to me that he deserves to be that starter. This is someone that is a journeyman. He had last started a game in 2023, before this game. And so, again, there's the reason for that. And so I think you just got to continue to work with J.J. McCarthy, and hopefully he'll be healthy enough for the Vikings to be able to play in next week's game. Again, while you're in here, please make sure you hit that sub button. I'm on my road to my first 100 subscribers. It really helps me out. If you have any topics, any takes that you want to share, make sure you share that in chat as well. You can always comment on these videos. Also, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps other people find my stream. So I really do appreciate that. Let's go ahead and dive into the next game. This was the Washington Commanders playing against the Atlanta Falcons. And I think the biggest thing and biggest takeaway for this game is the fact that Michael Penix did figure some things out. And I think it actually did help the fact that they changed, the play calling in this game to the quarterback coach for the Falcons. I think the changing of play caller and Michael Penix, getting into a good rhythm was like the major difference in this game. Penix did throw for 313 yards in this game. He also had 2 touchdowns. He did have 1 interception, and that interception, I'm not really sure what was going on. He kind of threw it right to a defender. That didn't really seem to be a situation where I was like, oh, like he clearly must have missed that guy. It looked like he was looking at that corner the entire way through. And so I was shocked by that interception. But again, it was a much better performance for Michael Penix, like overall. Michael Penix, I have had my doubts, and I'm still not on this. I'm not on some train where I'm like, oh, he is the guy. But at the same time, you have to be happy with the fact that he was able to perform in this game. I will say that the younger quarterbacks around the NFL, and we'll talk more about Jackson Dart later on as well, but I think there's been a drop-off in performances from these younger quarterbacks. Caleb Williams, I'd say, had a really solid game this week, and we'll talk more about him. But, J.J. McCarthy, he didn't play in this week's game. Like I said, we're talking about Michael Penix right now. But, Cam Ward looks to be in a lot of trouble. That Titans team, we'll talk more about them as well. But I'm just not impressed with a lot of these younger quarterbacks in general. I do think that the Falcons have really solid weapons around Penix. Like Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson had 106 yards in the passing game, and he had like 76 yards rushing in this game against the Commanders. So, as well as Michael Penix played, Bijan Robinson played even better, in my opinion. That is a scary weapon to have if you're the Atlanta Falcons. And you include another player like a Drake London, who also had 110 yards receiving in this game, and he had a touchdown. Again, you have really good weapons around Michael Penix, and so there's not really an excuse, in my opinion, for any time Penix doesn't play that well. Even his line is a solid offensive line. I know he's had some issues with injuries at the tackle position, but overall, I think they have the best guard play in the NFL. And so again, there's not really a lot of excuses other than just inexperience as to why Michael Penix can't perform out there. And he didn't have any excuses in this game. And again, the Falcons won this game 34-27. Now on the other side, the Commanders, they're obviously without Jaden Daniels in this game, and I think that had the biggest impact on this game overall. They also didn't have Terry McLaurin. So Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin being out for the Commanders is really what impacted and hurt this team the most. Mariota threw for 156 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, but he also had an interception in this game. And then in the pass game, their best rusher had 59 yards on 7 carries. That's not going to win you games. I mean, they had 147 yards on the ground overall, but again, it was across multiple different runners, and there was no true like big plays. Like they didn't get a single touchdown on the ground. They did have a long run for 48 yards, but at the same time, it just wasn't enough for this Commanders team. Like they really do need Jaden Daniels to be successful. They did win last week without Jaden Daniels, but I do think that's more so the exception and not the rule in their case. I think Jaden Daniels is very similar to Lamar Jackson, this Ravens team. Like the Ravens are not even close to being a good team without Lamar Jackson. The Washington Commanders are kind of in the same boat when it comes to not having Jaden Daniels out there. One other note I'll have on this game is the fact that I was happy that Deebo Samuel was able to get going in the pass game. I've talked about that a couple times. Like Deebo Samuel, I felt like they weren't quite sure how to utilize him a lot, especially in the pass game. Like he's a Swiss Army knife sort of player. Like that's how he was with the 49ers, and I expected the Commanders to sort of use Deebo Samuel in the same way, but didn't really necessarily see that happen. And I thought without Terry McLaurin, we were going to see more utilization of Deebo, and we definitely did in the past. He had 6 catches, again, for 72 yards and a touchdown. In the run game, he did run the ball 3 times, but he only got 9 yards there. So, like, again, there's still more work to be done with Deebo Samuel and this Commanders team. But, again, didn't have enough in order to beat, a Falcons team at home who is they were coming off of a tough loss against the Panthers, right? They didn't score a single point against the Panthers, so they obviously came out angry and looking to turn things around, and this was a game where they were able to do that. The next game I'm going to talk about, we won't talk about this game too much, but I will say, credit to the Saints. I'm talking about the New Orleans Saints going up against the Buffalo Bills. Credit to the Saints for actually making this a close game. This game was much closer than I expected. Even though the score ended up being 31-19, it was close throughout. New Orleans was consistently keeping up with them. I mean, at halftime, it was 10-14. Buffalo was winning. It continued to look like that even in the third quarter. After the third quarter, it was 16-20, right? That is a close game. It wasn't until the third quarter when the Bills put up 10 more points that this game, was out of reach for the Saints. But the Bills, they were successful rushing the ball. James Cook had a great game in this game. He had 117 yards and a touchdown. They also had Josh Allen, who had 45 yards and a touchdown as well, on top of his 209 yards passing. He had 2 touchdown passes passing, and then he also had an interception. But again, I think the real story in this game is the fact that the Saints were sticking around. The Bills are probably the best team in the AFC. I think them and the Chargers are the best team in the AFC. So for the Saints to be able to keep up with this team, especially on the road, it was not what I expected. And, you'd think in order to be able to keep up with them that Spencer Rattler had some crazy game. He really didn't. This game was really kind of controlled throughout. This was a 3-phase game for the Saints and for the Bills. They didn't let up a lot of plays regardless. The longest passing play was 43 yards for the Bills. That's a decent pass, but again, only one of those is really what is going to keep you in games is if you stop those. Now, I will say that on the other side, the Bills, they didn't let up any explosive plays. They didn't give up a single play over 20 yards. So again, that's why you're seeing a 19-point game from the Saints. But, Spencer Rattler, he only had 126 yards passing. He did have a touchdown, but he also didn't throw a single interception. The player I'm probably most curious and want to talk about the most when it comes to the New Orleans Saints is Chris Olave. Chris Olave, first stat you see when you pull up the box score is the fact that he actually had 1 pass and it was intercepted. But you also have to look at what he did in the passing game. He had three catches on 6 targets for 20 yards. Now, he did have a touchdown, but this is supposed to be their wide receiver one. And, when I'll pull it up, when I pull up Chris Olave's stats, he has 26 receptions for 185 yards and a touchdown this season. Like, he's tied for 44th when it comes to receiving yards this season. He's tied for 5th in the most amount of receptions, but he's not doing anything with them. Again, if you have the 5th most receptions, but then you have 185 yards, like, at a certain point, you need to be able to make plays for your team. And what that tells me is he's getting open, but he's not doing much after the fact. And the Saints need a game breaker to have any shot in these games, because their defense isn't good enough and their offense obviously isn't good enough overall. So you need someone to be able to break some plays for them and change the trajectory of this team in any given Sunday. And again, not being able to get yards after the catch is going to be a huge issue for Chris Olave. Like, if you're catching like 5-yard outs or 5, 6, 8-yard outs on a regular basis and you're not doing anything with it, that's not a wide receiver one. That's just like your everyday possession receiver. And so again, for me, it's what are they going to do with Chris Olave? You're coming up on a year where I think you're getting close to his contract year. He was drafted in 2022. He was the 11th pick overall, though. And so again, someone that's had injury issues, he isn't necessarily doing anything to prove that he deserves like a major contract from the Saints team. I'll be really curious to see what the Saints do with him. But again, I will say, again, kudos to the Saints for keeping this a remotely close game. They did lose 31-19, but this was a much better game than I think anyone really expected. So, I will say that about this. Let's go ahead and dive into the next game. We're going to be talking about the Cleveland Browns playing against the Detroit Lions. Now, the Browns are coming off a huge upset win where they beat the Packers in Cleveland. And so I think there's a lot of people that were thinking, hey, maybe they do this again. Maybe they turn it back around and they win another game against an NFC North team. Maybe they just have the NFC North's number. That didn't necessarily, that wasn't the case. And I think that the topic that we need to talk about when it comes to the Cleveland Browns is, how many games do we need to see Joe Flacco out there for more? Like, how many more games do we need to see Joe Flacco play? I know that he gives this Brown team the best chance of winning, but you're 1-3. You're not a team that is projected to be a playoff team. I don't think there's anyone in this Cleveland Browns locker room or organization that expects them to make the playoffs. Like, what are you actually trying to win for other than like pride? You have 2 rookie quarterbacks, albeit they weren't drafted high. Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd, and then Shedeur Sanders in the 5th. But, like, why aren't we seeing them out there playing yet? Like, how many games are you going to give Joe Flacco? Because he's in his 40s. This is probably the last year of his career. Who knows if he might come back just because he's bored. I know he's got, like, 4 or 5 kids and probably gets, driven crazy at home. And so he loves football and he wants to continue to play. But for me, it's just like, how many more games do you need to give him? Because it's not like this guy's winning you games necessarily. The brightest spot of this this Browns team, like the brightest spot of this Browns team is Quinshon Judkins right now. Quinshon Judkins had a great game. He had 82 yards and a touchdown in this game on the ground. I will say they definitely hit the mark when it came to drafting him. Minus all the off the field issues, the domestic violence dispute that happened, he's come back and he's come back strong for this Browns team. He didn't have a training camp and he's having the performance that he's having. Ashton Genty, I think, outplayed him this week, but overall, I would say Quinshon Judkins is the best running back that we've seen come out of this draft class so far. He's consistent in both the run and in the pass game. He can do both. I think the Browns really found a guy with this, and maybe that's why they were completely fine letting Bradley Chubb leave, Nick Chubb leave. But he had 4 catches for 33 yards in the pass, and again he had 82 yards on 21 rushes and a touchdown in the run game. He is their best weapon. He is also a rookie. Let's see what these other rookies can do. I mean, Dylan Gabriel was in there for one play. He was 0 for 1. And so why not just try him out more? I'm not even saying like, hey, pick between Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. I don't care which one at this point. But just play one of them. Just play one of these rookies. Like, why wouldn't you? The season, I know, is not over by any means. We are just 4 weeks in. But at the same time, what do you think, again, is going to happen with Joe Flacco out there? Do you think this guy is going to make you a playoff team? He's not. He's just not. He doesn't have that in his bag anymore. He didn't throw a single touchdown in this game. He had 2 interceptions. And he had 184 yards passing. He went 16 for 34 in this game. Like, these aren't numbers that are like, oh, this guy deserves to be the starter. They just know he's better than what they have otherwise. But again, try out these rookies because you're going to be in a position where you're going to be able to draft a quarterback in next year's draft, in this next draft. You might as well figure out if Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders are viable options before you draft another quarterback. Maybe you've already made that decision, and that's why. But again, I just don't know how many games you want to wait. The Giants, they decided not to wait. They put Jackson Dart out there as soon as they possibly could after an 0-3 start. And we'll talk more about them. But again, for me, it's just, what are you going to continuously do with Joe Flacco out there? I just don't understand the point of that. Now, on the other side, let's talk a little bit about the Detroit Lions because, they are one of the best teams in the NFL and I think a top 2 team in the NFC, in my opinion. Jared Goff, he didn't even have to do much in this game. He had 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I would say Jahmyr Gibbs had the best performance from an offensive perspective for the Lions. He had 91 yards and a touchdown in on the ground. And so you have to be happy with Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery took the day off. David Montgomery had 9 carries for 12 yards, which is crazy after the game he had against the Ravens. That completely, it was a night and day difference in their performance for David Montgomery. But again, this Lions team, they're just really solid. They're Aiden Hutchinson. He had a scare in this game. I think every single Lions fan was holding their breath when he went down. It almost kind of looked like he was holding his leg as well in this situation. Apparently, he had gotten the wind knocked out of him though. But he did a good job of playing it off like it was a leg injury. Not sure why he had to scare your fans like that, but he did have 2 sacks in this game. So yeah, this Lions team, they're just really solid overall. I mean, again, they won this game 34-10 after the Browns had upset the Packers. I just think this Lions team, again, top 2 team in the NFC, maybe even a top team in the NFL, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Before I dive into this next game, any thoughts on the Week 4 games? Any games that you thought were most exciting or matchups that you thought were most exciting that you watched? You guys have ever one of those days where you're just so thirsty? You just can't stop drinking. That's one of those days for me, so I apologize, but continuously thirsty. Sorry. Next game we're going to get into. This game, again, probably not the most exciting headline, but it is the Carolina Panthers playing against the New England Patriots. And, first thing I'll say about this is the Carolina, what they did to the Falcons, the New England Patriots did to them. I think... first off, the game was 42-13. If you missed it, the Patriots won 42-13, and it wasn't even close from the beginning. The Panthers put up 6 points in the first quarter. It was 6-7 going into the second quarter, so you kind of thought there was a chance. But then the Patriots put up 21 points in the second quarter, and it immediately after that just became an out of control game. I think the biggest thing we need to talk about here is should the Panthers be done with Bryce Young? This is his 3rd year. Last year, he had that situation where he had a terrible start to the season. He got benched. He came back, and he actually looked pretty solid at the end of last season. It seemed to me that there was buy-in with Dave Canales and this Panthers organization. I thought Dave Canales really turned things around, and there was a chance for him that this would work out for the Panthers. But I'm looking at them. He had 150 yards passing. He had 1 touchdown in this game. You look at his stats, like he's got like 650 yards passing on the season. And that's through 4 games. Like that is not going to win you any games. That is not a first pick in the draft sort of numbers, especially year 3. Like year 3, he should be averaging like 200 plus yards in the air, and he should have at least 5 or 6 touchdowns. I'll say 6 or 7 touchdowns by this time in the season. And if you look at it, he's got 753 yards. He has 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And that's through 4 games. Like that is not going to win you any sort of games. You know, his completion percentage so far is 60%, which isn't terrible. But again, you're averaging somewhere around like 170 yards a game so far. Like this is a passing league. There's teams that will be averaging 250 to 300 yards per game in the air by the end of the season. And again, you're averaging somewhere right around 160, 170 yards in the air right now. It's just, what are you going to do with that if you're the Carolina Panthers? You also have to look at this, is Dave Canales, is that guy's job in trouble? I know this is his second year, but to me, he got the players he wanted. They made a lot of changes last year going into the season, and they made even more changes this year. But regardless, it just doesn't seem to be enough. Again, they did beat the Falcons. To me, the Falcons kind of beat themselves. I just don't know where you go if you're the Panthers. I don't think you can trade Bryce Young, because if you trade Bryce Young, you're not going to get a lot out of him. You know, I'd be surprised if anyone were to give more than a 6th rounder for Bryce Young at this point. I don't think there's anyone out there that'd be remotely interested in that. Now, you also have their run game, which I would say isn't struggling terribly. You know, Chuba Hubbard had 10 carries for 49 yards, so he's averaging a pretty solid average. But again, you only ran the ball with him 10 times, and so I'm not really sure what you expect out of that. And like again, I'm saying all this because like I'm trying to understand the Dave Canales mindset and the system and what their thought process is. Because Bryce Young threw the ball 30 times for 150 yards, and they had 129 yards on the ground. But again, there was no sort of there was no rhythm, there was no cohesiveness within this offense. It just seems like kind of scattered. There was little bits and pieces of success, but it just wasn't really fully there. Ted McMillan, I think he's a good receiver. He just can't seem to find the end zone, though. He was targeted 8 times. He had 4 catches. You know, he had 62 yards in the air. He was their leading receiver. But again, it's just, I don't put that on Ted. Like, I think that's a Bryce Young thing. Like, Bryce Young, I just don't think he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. I just don't. And I hate to take away more time from talking about the Patriots, but at the same time, like, I really do think we need to be having this conversation already, because I thought they were going to have momentum coming out of last season, and it seems to me they started this season exactly where they were last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing conversations about Bryce Young coming out of Carolina. Like, there should be questions like, hey, is he the guy? Is this someone you're going to be sticking with? I know Andy Dalton is the backup. Andy Dalton he ended up playing in this game. He went 5 for 6 for 58 yards and a touchdown in garbage play. So, like, I know Andy Dalton's not the answer, but Bryce Young definitely isn't. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And then you also have people like, you know, Xavier Legette. I don't think Xavier Legette touched the field yesterday. I think that was the right decision, but, you know, that's a player that they invested draft capital in, and he just isn't performing. Now, on the other side, I will say from a receiving perspective, the Patriots finally saw production from Stephon Diggs, and they really did need that. I think Stephon Diggs needed that. You know, you're hearing more about Stephon Diggs' baby mama drama than you are his performance on the field. And so getting 101 yards in this game, he needed that. because I've heard more about Cardi B and these Instagram models that he's impregnated than I have his performance on the field. So that was much needed. I think Drake May, he's proven to me to be a solid quarterback as long as he doesn't generate mistakes. If he doesn't throw an interception and doesn't fumble the ball, he's a great quarterback. He had 203 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. He was 14 for 17 as well. So he threw for more yards on less passes than Bryce Young by 50 yards. Like, that just shows you, like, the difference between these quarterbacks. It really was, a night and day difference between these two. And so, again, credit to the Patriots for winning this game. Again, I think the biggest story is how long do the Panthers hold on to Bryce Young as the starter, and are they already going to start looking for a new head coach as well? I think that's the biggest thing for me. Now, let's go ahead and dive into probably one of the most exciting starts for a quarterback in his young NFL career. I'm talking about the Los Angeles Chargers facing off against the New York Giants. So, again, what a game of highs and lows for the Giants. I love the fact that they've found this sort of young core that they have. I'll say that right off the bat. Cam Scatterbo, I'm a huge fan of Cam Scatterbo. I mean, I don't know why or how you cannot like Cam Scatterbo. Like, that guy, he's not, like, loud in a sense of, like, hey, look at me. He definitely has that sort of, like, energy to him, though. Like, he is a pound the ground stone, just like, I'm going to run through your face sort of runner. But he's not like a dramatic guy. He's not a drama person. So I love Cam Scatterbo. I think he's a great addition to this young team. It seems to me like they found a solid quarterback in Jackson Dart as a starter. Again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. To me, Jackson Dart, I think he'll be the best quarterback to come out of this draft class. Like, I think Cam Ward is good, but I think Jackson Dart just seems to be sort of a game changer, in my opinion. You won't necessarily see that fully from the stats in this game, but again, Cam Scatterbo, he had 25 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. Sorry, he didn't have a touchdown in this game, but that guy would just carry the ball. He just goes and goes and goes. And then, sadly, again, from like a lows perspective, like, I love Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors, I think, will be one of the top receivers in this league for a long time. Sadly, it's been confirmed that Malik Neighbors has torn his ACL. But again, like, I love the young core that they have found with Jackson Dart, with Malik Neighbors, with Cam Scatterbo. I think that is the most exciting part to come out of this game, even though Malik Neighbors ended up with an ACL injury. It's like, you have 3 guys on the offensive side right there that could be an impact part of your team for many years to come. Now, add on the other side of that, their young defensive core, right? They have a really solid young defensive core as well with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter. I think you're going to need to see more out of Abdul Carter. He's someone that I expected a lot more so far. But again, I think you'll see more of that. But the Giants won this game 21-18. And this was a game where they were up the entire time. The Chargers always stuck around. But, the Giants just didn't give up this game. And it was a game where generally you would expect there to be mistakes being had with a very young quarterback. Again, Jackson Dart, he didn't blow you out of the water with the stats. He had 111 passing yards, right? So that's not a lot of passing yards at all. He did have a touchdown, but he had no interceptions. He didn't lose the ball. He did fumble the ball, but it was recovered by the Giants. And so, again, he didn't make mistakes, and their defense did just enough to really harness this Chargers offense. I love this Chargers offense. You've probably heard me say this before. I think they have the best receiving trio in the NFL. We continuously see Quentin Johnson be the top target for this passing game, which is, I don't think anyone expects. I didn't even expect that. I thought Quentin Johnson was going to have a good year. I didn't think he was going to be the number 1 target for Justin Herbert. But he had 8 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown in this game. Again, he's continuously been the top receiver for the Chargers week in, week out. And the other thing you have to talk about when it comes to the Chargers is Omarion Hampton. Like, that guy is a stud. Like, we talked about Cam Scatterbo. Like, we also have to talk about Omarion Hampton, because Omarion Hampton, he had 12 carries for 128 yards and a touchdown in this game. Like, talk about making an impact. Like, this guy is without Najee Harris, his running mate, and he said, "Don't worry about it. I got it. Just give me the ball." And he did a great job. He also had 5 catches for 37 yards in this game. So he was essentially the Chargers offense in a lot of different ways besides Quentin Johnson. One thing we also have to say when it comes to the Chargers is, what's going on with Ladd McConkey? Ladd McConkey, he had 6 targets, but he only had 1 catch for 11 yards in this game. Like, I'm not sure if he's injured, if defense are just keying on him and saying, "Hey, we're gonna make Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen beat us," which to me is just like a crazy concept to begin with. But Ladd McConkey's not having the season I expected out of him. I'll pull up his stats real quick. He's got 16 catches for 174 yards and no touchdowns. So that's someone that I expected to be, around 1,100 yards and several touchdowns going into this year. And he's definitely disappointed. Again, this could be because of the fact that they're keying so much on him, and that's leaving Quentin Johnson open. But Quentin Johnson's taking advantage of the situation, and he's well deserving of being that top receiver so far for the Chargers. He has 22 catches, 334 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Sorry, he has 337 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, he's third in the NFL in yards right now. He's third in touchdowns as well. Like, that is a wide receiver 1 number right there. And I'm still waiting for all those doubters, all those haters to tell me I'm wrong, because I remember when I put out a video talking about this being the top receiving core in the NFL, I had a lot of people tell me I was crazy. So I'm waiting to hear those people apologize to me, but probably won't happen. But regardless, happy for this Chargers team from that perspective that he's performing. Happy for Quentin Johnson. Again, wasn't enough in this game. Again, the Chargers lost this game. It was 21 to 18. But you have to be happy for the Giants. It's sad that they lost Malik Neighbors. Again, Malik Neighbors, he will be out for this season, but that guy will be a top receiver in this league for many years to come. Let's talk about this Philadelphia Eagles versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is, the Eagles. What an interesting team right now. What does everyone think about A.J. Brown right now with the Eagles? That situation's kind of crazy, right? Like, A.J. Brown, let's just say this real fast. The Eagles are 4-0, and they're dealing with unhappy players right now. I never expected that to be a thing. But A.J. Brown is unhappy with the Philadelphia Eagles. He put out this quote, and I want to make sure I read this. So he posted this on social media after the game. And we'll talk more about this game, but I think this is probably more important than this game itself. A.J. Brown put out a quote that said, "If you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene, shrug your shoulders, and be on your way." So this is a player that won a Super Bowl last year with the Philadelphia Eagles. Last week, he did see his best week so far this season. But again, this week just didn't have the numbers. He didn't have the touches. Let me just pull up his stats real fast. So before I go into his stats, Eagles won this game 31-25. And again, the Eagles are 4-0, and they beat an undefeated Bucs team who is now 3-1 in Tampa Bay. A.J. Brown he was targeted 9 times. Truth be told, I haven't gone through all of those and whether or not he dropped some of those, or if they're bad passes, but he ended up with 2 catches for 7 yards in this game. Now, again, last week he had a much better game. He's got 151 yards and 1 touchdown on the season so far. Now, if I pull up these games, let me just pull up the stats for these individual games. Okay, so in his 4 games this year, he has 1 catch for 8 yards,
5 catches for 27 yards, 6 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown, and then 2 catches for 7 yards. So again, he has 14 catches for 151 yards and 1 touchdown, and this is an all-pro caliber wide receiver. So let me just say this, I can understand that you are unhappy. On the other side of this, you're 4-0. Like, you should just be happy that you're on a winning team. The Titans gave you up, which I still don't understand why, and it's proving now to be one of the worst decisions that the Titans have probably made in franchise history. But at the same time, if you're 4-0, like, do you really need to make this all about you? You know, he said this in the offseason. You know, it was like 4 days after they had won the Super Bowl. Like, A.J. Brown basically said, like, the excitement of winning the Super Bowl has already, like, worn off of me. Like, that doesn't make me happy. That's not why I play football. I play football to dominate my matchup. I play football to have an impact. So, like, he really is all about himself. All he truly cares about is what he is able to accomplish in these games. And when you're on a team with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, who just... I'll say this about the Eagles. They won this game the way that they always win games. It's methodically. It's like a death by 1,000 needles. Right? They're not doing anything explosive whatsoever. Their most exciting play they showed was a fake tush push. Like the highlight that everyone showed from this game was not some crazy pass, wasn't some crazy run from Saquon Barkley. It was a fake end around tush push to Saquon Barkley for a touchdown. Like, that was the most exciting highlight of this Philadelphia Eagles game. They won this game, and that was the highlight. Like, everyone's talking about A.J. Brown, and everyone's talking about the fake tush push. The fact that they faked a tush push. They won this game 31-25. If you actually look at their stats, you don't understand why. Jalen Hurts threw the ball for 130 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns. He also did have 62 yards in the run. Saquon Barkley had 43 yards rushing and a touchdown. Like, there's no stats that say, like, oh, like, they absolutely dominated this game, but they just find ways to win on a regular basis. Like, they remind me of the Chiefs from last year. If you remember the Chiefs from last year, the Chiefs, they just always found a way to win games. It didn't matter how or what the score was. They just found really weird ways to win games. And I feel like that's where, like, the Eagles are this year. I feel like the Eagles, they're just such a good culture and such a good organization that they just, like, find really odd ways to end up winning games. Now, I will say on the other side of things, like, really impressed with Baker Mayfield still. You know, Baker Mayfield, he had 289 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. You know, the interception probably turned out to be what sealed this game for the Eagles. But, you know, he was without Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin actually played. He was without Mike Evans in this game. And that plays a huge impact when you have an all-pro caliber wide receiver that is missing. I'm in love with Emeka Egbuka. Like, Emeka Egbuka, if he could have played for the Ravens, I would have been so happy. Like, that guy is just a stud. Like, he had 4 catches for 101 yards and 1 touchdown in this game. 100% to me, he is the best receiver to come out of this draft class. Like, Tet McMillan, you're solid, but Emeka Egbuka is the best receiver to come out of that draft class. Now, again, just to get back to this A.J. Brown thing really quick, I'm not really sure what is going to solve this other than just continuously passing him the ball, because it seems to me like that is all he cares about. And so you have to wonder, as a Phillies organization, as being a Super Bowl winning team, do you put A.J. Brown's needs ahead of the team? Because at a certain point, there will be a point where you kind of have to make that decision. Because if you continuously play the games the way you are, he's going to continuously cause problems and cause drama. You know, last year this was an issue. People kind of forget about this. Like, there was an issue with the same situation last year. It all got quieted down by the fact that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But if you remember, AJ Brown brought books out onto the fields, and like it came out that he always does apparently, but like they made a big deal out of that last year. And I was like, look, he's so unhappy. Like he's reading a book right now. He's like, I always read a book, but again, like you kind of have to make a decision. I think at a certain point, the Eagles are going to get to a point where they have to decide between making AJ Brown happy and winning games. Because Jalen Hurts is not the throw the ball down the field type of running back, like or type of quarterback. Like they know that. That is why he has 130 yards passing in this game. He's definitely, I would say, productive when it comes to those passes, but at the same time, like he's not gonna outthrow Baker Mayfield. He's just not. He's not gonna outthrow Matt Stafford or Jared Goff. You know, he's going to have a sort of combination of passing and running and just not making mistakes. And again, this Eagles team, they've proven this over and over. It's like death by 1,000 needles. It's just little pins, little pokes, just here and there, just here and there. And like eventually it brings the other team down. And that's how they're winning games. They're not blowing people out of the water. They're winning close games against good teams. But again, like it's not something where you're looking at this team saying like this is a dominant team. They're just a really good team that knows how to win. While you're in here, any thoughts on AJ Brown? Is AJ Brown going to finish the season with the Eagles? Are they going to have to trade him? What do you guys think? Next game we're going to get into, and we won't talk too much about this one, but it's the Tennessee Titans versus the Houston Texans. What I'll say about this game is the Tennessee Titans are terrible. I think Cam Ward even said it after this game. Cam Ward said, like, we're ass. Like, I think he actually used that exact line. He's like, we played like ass. Like, they don't know how to play together. Cam Ward's already frustrated. Like, you can just tell there's no one on this team that believes in themselves. No one believes in Coach Callahan. Coach Callahan is already extremely defensive. Even in his post-press conference game, he was asked, like, is this team resilient? He's like, don't ask me that question. Like, I know what you're trying to do here, and I'm just going to compose myself before I say something I shouldn't. Callahan, you should not be the head coach. I think that's blatantly obvious. I think it was a terrible decision for the Titans to move on from Vrabel. I think that sort of decision was something that was like, hey, like, we need a change of, like, we just need a change of like, scenery is really the only reason I can really think of for the fact that the Titans gave up Mike Vrabel. Because I think, if anything, Mike Vrabel probably was very vocal about the fact that he thought it was stupid for them to give up A.J. Brown. You saw that being blatantly obvious during the draft, like during every aspect. Like, you could just tell he thought it was the dumbest decision for the Titans to give up A.J. Brown. And again, you're seeing a Titans team who also gave up their, Bill Callahan gave up the play calling capabilities. He gave it to Hardegree, the offensive or the quarterback coach, and that did nothing for this team. I'm going to pull up the stats now, but Cam Ward threw for 108 yards and an interception in this game. He was 10 for 26. Right, so much less than a 50% completion percentage, 108 yards and one interception. He had a quarterback rating of 27.4. That was his QBR. Again, I'm not saying this is on Bill Callahan, but at the same time, this team is terrible. Tony Pollard, feel bad for you, man. 14 carries, 64 yards, so he had a decent average, but they're not going to win games on the ground, and they're definitely not going to win games in the air. Like, their receiving core is elementary at best, right? Alec Ayamanor, I don't know how to say your name. I apologize for not being able to say your name, but he had 2 catches for 44 yards for this Titans team, and that was their leading receiver. On the other side, I'll say something positive. Like, I'm happy for the fact that C.J. Stroud won a game this year. C.J. Stroud, he had been struggling mightily at the beginning of the season. He had 233 yards and he had 2 touchdowns in this game. Woody Marks, rookie running back, he had 69 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and he had another 50 yards and a touchdown in the air. That's definitely something to be excited about if you're a Texans fan, is the fact that Woody Marks might end up being a playmaker for you, because Nick Chubb isn't having the season I thought he was going to have. Nick Chubb had 13 carries for 47 yards in this game, and I don't think he's topped 50 yards in a single game this year so far. So again, the Houston Texans won this game 26-0. Both of these teams, similar to the Monday night game tonight, were winless going into this game. Both of them were 0-3. Now the Texans were 1-3, so kudos to them for winning a game. The AFC South is by far the worst division in NFL football. We'll talk more about the Jags in a second, but between the Titans and the Texans, both of these teams just are not good. The Texans, they play against the Ravens next week. We'll talk more about them, but I just, the biggest thing for me in this game is what is the answer for Cam Ward? He already seems frustrated and doesn't have any. I don't think anyone has confidence in this game, or in this team, I should say. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen there, but that's really all I have to say about that game. It's just both of them are not in a good situation, but the Titans are just absolutely terrible. Let's talk really quickly about this Indianapolis Colts versus the Los Angeles Rams. So I think this was the best game that Matt Stafford has had all year. He had 375 yards passing for 3 touchdowns. And again, to me, this was a game where you could not tell that he had back issues going into this season. I was very, very worried about his back going into this season. He's just older, and back issues linger. Back issues just nag. And he had a great game. He's had a great season so far. Puka Nacua, 170 yards in the air and a touchdown. What a stud. Did anyone... I know that Matt Stafford always has his guy, and it's been Cooper Kupp in the past, and before that you could probably say it was Calvin Johnson, right? He's always sort of had a guy that he favorites, but I don't think anyone expected Puka Nacua to be as productive as long as he's been productive. A lot of times, people are paying attention to Cooper Kupp a lot, and I felt like that was why Puka had been able to have the numbers he had in prior seasons, but he's still just doing it. Devontae Adams, he had 56 yards and a touchdown in this game. He's not exactly performing the way I expected him, but Puka is he is the guy. He is Matt Stafford's guy, and you have to be impressed with him. Now, on the other side, Daniel Jones, he had a decent game. He had 262 yards. He had 1 touchdown, and he had 2 interceptions, and those 2 interceptions were probably the difference in this game, besides the fact that probably the craziest thing I'd seen in a while was Adonai Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell, he had what should have been a touchdown catch. It was a 75-yard catch, and he was going to essentially just put the ball out over the end zone, and he ends up he loses the ball. He ends up fumbling the ball into the end zone and out of the end zone, out of it. And it ended up being in the Rams' ball. That very well could have been the difference in this game, on top of Daniel Jones's interceptions. So, again, to me, this is such a real team, this Colts team. You have to be really excited if you're Indianapolis and if you're an Indianapolis Colts fan. They're competing with really good teams on a regular basis. This was their first loss, and they've competed against really good teams otherwise. And so again, the Rams, I'll put them top 3 in the NFC right now. I think they're actually ahead of the Packers, and this Colts team, they're actually one of the top teams in the AFC, and that's with even after this loss, I would still say that. Jonathan Taylor didn't have the game that he really needed to have in order for the Colts to win this game, but he still had 75 yards on the ground. So again, they have the weapons. Adonai Mitchell, who hadn't had much of a year so far, he was their leading receiver with 96 yards. And then Tyler Warren, who's been Mr. Consistent, he had 70 yards as well. So, like, they have the weapons, and they also have a pretty solid defense. Again, this Rams offense is probably one of the best in the NFL between Stafford, Nakua, Kyron Williams, Devontae Adams, right? There's so many weapons that they have. So, again, like, this Colts team, they're a real team, and so are the Rams. Again, I'll say this again, as long as Matt Stafford's back is healthy, this is a top 3 team in the NFC. Let's talk real fast about the 49ers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. So first off, Jaguars, they pulled out another win. The Jaguars have a winning record so far this season. They're 3-1 right now. And so are the 49ers. And I think this was the type of game where the 49ers, they kept it close. Like, the Jacksonville Jaguars kept finding ways to pull away. I'd say Travis Etienne is a huge reason for that. Travis Etienne had 124 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He's having a great season after having a very disappointing year last year. Them holding on to Etienne and letting go of Tank Bigsby says a lot about, what they think about Travis Etienne, and he's taking advantage of those opportunities. Trevor Lawrence still not being Mr. Consistent. He has 174 yards passing with 1 touchdown. It's just not doing what he needs to do. I would say on that same line, like Travis Hunter, he's not doing much to excite me yet either. I've talked about it. Emeka Egbuka is far and beyond the best receiver in this class. Ted McMillan I'd put at second, and Travis Hunter just, I don't know if it's just because he's playing on both sides and he just can't get into a rhythm on the offensive side or what. But he had 42 yards in this game, no touchdowns. He's getting a fair amount of targets, but he's just not taking advantage of them. The jury's still out to me on Travis Hunter. But again, the 49ers, I think this was just a game where Brock Purdy tried to do too much. He had a solid game. He had 309 yards passing. He had 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions. And that's what I mean. Like the 2 interceptions, both of them, you could just tell he was forcing the ball. Right? And that's really what gave them the biggest issue, because otherwise they're just super consistent. Like McCaffrey, he had another one of those games where it was basically like 150 yards all purpose. He had 49 yards rushing and 92 yards receiving and a touchdown receiving. Like, he's just putting up the yardage in every which way. Ricky Pearsall, he ended up coming off a little bit hobbled. Juwan Jennings, he got absolutely sandwiched in the end zone for a touchdown. It would have been a touchdown, but like, they just have too many injuries, this 49ers team. Those injuries finally caught up to the 49ers. And like I said, Travis Etienne had a great game, and when you can run the ball, that is such a great recipe for winning a game is having a successful run game. It doesn't you can make up for so many mistakes and help your team so much from like a bulk, like from a time of possession perspective, opening up the passing game, right? There's just so many ways that helps out your team. And so Travis Etienne having the impact he's having is a major reason, in my opinion, why the Jags are 3-1. Now let's get this next game we're going to talk about. There's 3 games left that we're going to talk about. This next game we're going to talk about, this one's near and dear to my heart, and this one hurts to talk about. It's the Baltimore Ravens versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I am a Baltimore Ravens fan. I don't talk about that too much on here. I'm not trying to hide the fact that I am a Ravens fan, but I also don't want to be like super biased when it comes to this show, this channel, and like what I talk about. So the first thing I'll say is the Chiefs did have a solid game in this game. They played consistently. They didn't make mistakes, right? They did everything they needed to do to make sure that the Ravens didn't have a reason to stay in the game. Now, on the other side of the ball, and the thing that sucks the most about this game, and what made this game just not like, it just made this game tough to watch and a tough pill to swallow. It's the fact that the Ravens ended up with 7 of their 11 defensive starters not playing in this game. In this game, the Ravens had Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Lamar Jackson, and Ronnie Stanley go out in this game. Like, those are 5 key players that start for the Ravens that did not finish this game for the Ravens. Now, what I will say is, from the Ravens side, from Lamar Jackson especially, I hate to say this because I love Lamar Jackson, but it looked to me like Lamar Jackson just gave up on that game. I don't think he had a hamstring issue. I think Lamar Jackson was just so frustrated with how bad this Ravens offensive line is, and he was probably frustrated with the play calling of the Ravens as well, that he gave up on this game. Like, he was only sacked 3 times in this game, but it felt like so much more. Like, I felt like he was constantly just running for his life, and you were just watching a offensive line that had no idea what they were doing. You know, in the run game is just completely non-existent now. You know, Justice Hill, he had 1 run for 71 yards. Other than that, he had 76 yards total, and he had 1 run for 71 yards, and he was the top runner for the Ravens. So other than his 1 run, he had 5 yards besides the 71-yard run. Lamar Jackson, 48 yards in the run, and Derrick Henry, 42 yards on 8 carries. Like, the Ravens gave up on Derrick Henry very early on in this game. They just gave up very early in general. Like, this Ravens team is in a lot of trouble. There seems to be, I'm not trying to panic, but there seems to be like a culture issue. There seems to be a team cohesiveness issue. They just don't seem to believe in each other. They don't seem to believe in the game plan. Like, again, Lamar Jackson quit on this team. There is no doubt in my mind that he could have played in that game for the rest of that game. He was not limping. There was no grimaces from a hamstring perspective. He just walked off the field. He basically threw his helmet and was like, I'm done. Like, that is exactly what happened. Like, he wasn't doing anything on the sideline to test out his hamstring or to be like, hey, let me see if I can get back in this game. Like, he sat there and he was like, I'm done. Like, he legitimately quit on this team. Like, that was very scary to watch if you're a Ravens game. Like, I don't believe in the Ravens at all. Like, right now, as a Ravens fan, I'm just saying, okay, like, we might as well just lose out and just start from scratch next season, because I'm looking at this team and I don't see the same Ravens team I'm used to. Like, Lamar Jackson doesn't look like the guy that's hungry to win games. Derrick Henry is just frustrated and has zero confidence. Our pass rush is non-existent, to say the least. We had 1 sack in this game. It was Tavius Robinson, and it was like a chase down sack. Like, Tavius Robinson, great effort. But like Odafe Owe, we didn't give you an extension. You got your 5th year, you got your 5th year option, but I don't think you have a single sack this season. Mike Green, like, I was extremely excited about you. I still think there's hope for you to be a good, solid pass rusher. Like, you're just not there yet. Mike Green is not there yet. And Kyle Van Noy is injured. And so you had Odafe Owe, you have David Ojabo, who is just not it. Like, David Ojabo, he won't be a Raven next year. Odafe Owe will not be a Raven next year. You're without you're without Nnamdi Madubuike, and you're also without Washington and Travis Jones. The entire defensive line for the Ravens was not playing in this game. And there's no signs of Nnamdi Madubuike or Broderick Washington coming back anytime soon. Who knows when Kyle Van Noy is going to come back? Roquan Smith has a hamstring issue. Like, there is not a lot of hope if you're the Baltimore Ravens right now. And again, the biggest situation, the scariest aspect to me, is Lamar Jackson quitting on this team. If you think that he didn't quit on this team, like, explain to me what happened then. Because I watched the guy walk off the field without a limp. He didn't test anything out, and he sat on that sideline, and he didn't get back up. There was some guy that was, testing out, like, doing like a knee flex sort of move, but like, to me, he wasn't testing anything out. Again, he didn't limp off the field. He got up off the ground and he walked off the field, and that was it. He threw his helmet and was like, I'm done. Like, that is so scary to watch if you're Baltimore Ravens. If you're the Baltimore Ravens organization, if you're a fan, they're playing the Texans next week. I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans win that game. I really wouldn't. Like, this team looks like they could lose to anybody right now. Their defense is an absolute liability. Like, if they don't have Nate Wiggins out there, their secondary is terrible. Marlon Humphrey's having a terrible year. Maybe it's because he's got some nagging injury. Again, he didn't finish this game. Like, they're just not there right now. Mikel Starks, what I'll say about Malachi Starks, not doing much yet. Malachi Starks is not having an impact on this defense yet. I know it takes a while for safeties to get up and running, but he's not doing what people expected him to do either. And so there's just not an impact player on the defensive side. Like, it's basically Kyle Hamilton. That's what this entire defense is Kyle Hamilton. And the offense, the entire offense is Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson quit this team in the third quarter. And I'm calling it quitting because that's really what it was. Did someone tell me otherwise? Did anyone else feel like Lamar Jackson didn't quit in that game? Because, again, to me, there was nothing that told me his hamstring was injured. I couldn't see a single sign out there that said, oh, Lamar Jackson has a hamstring issue. He just walked off the field. Not even limping. Cooper Rush isn't the answer. Like, that fourth down, game was over anyway. He had a fourth down conversion where he just, like, threw the ball out of bounds. It's like, what are you doing? Like, at least give it a shot. Like, throw an interception. Just do something. Just don't throw the ball out of the field like a loser. Like, what a terrible decision to have him be your backup quarterback. Like, Cooper Rush. Like, what a joke. I'm sorry. I'm getting heated right now, guys. Like, it's just, watching that game, it's just, the Ravens, again, they're in trouble. The Chiefs, congratulations on winning that game. You didn't do anything special other than just, you didn't do anything special in that game. That was literally the Ravens just being terrible. Sorry, Xavier Worthy. I know you had a career game with 83 yards. But again, none of that had to do with the fact that you guys outplayed the Ravens. The Ravens just outplayed themselves. The Ravens just gave up. Plain and simple. Oh, man. That's tough. Let's talk about this Bears versus Raiders game. Now, one thing I'll say, and I talked about this last week, another game decided by a blocked field goal. The Chicago Bears won this game, and they won this game in exciting fashion. The Las Vegas Raiders, they were up in this game seemingly the whole game. Like, there was not a point in time where the Bears had a lead in this game until the very end of this game. So Caleb Williams, he threw for 212 yards. Rome Odunze, his top target. Rome Odunze, 69 yards and a touchdown. Again, they didn't have a lead until the last minute and a half left in this game. Like, that was the first time the Bears actually took a lead in this game, when it was 25-24. And the Raiders still marched down the field and were in field goal range. And again, Kevin Byard, huge field goal block for the Bears to make this team 2-2. That is a huge difference, between 1 and 3. Like, 2-2, just from a mental perspective, is so much better than being 1 and 3. And that was such a crucial aspect for this Bears team. Because again, you're in a division with the Vikings, with the Lions, with the Packers. Like, all of those teams are really solid. The Packers getting a tie and you getting a win, those are things that could be the difference between a wild card position and not. I'm not saying the Bears are going to beat out the Packers for a wild card spot, but that's the type of things, those are the types of games, the types of situations that makes or breaks a team and makes the difference between a playoff team and not. So again, really happy for the Bears to actually pull this win out. Again, Caleb Williams, 212 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Rushing game isn't there. DeAndre Swift had 38 yards as their top rusher. But again, they did what they needed to do to win the game, and they didn't give up. That's the biggest thing you need to see from a quarterback like a Caleb Williams is how does he handle adversity and how does he handle tough situations? And I felt like he handled that like a true professional. I felt like he did exactly what he needed to do in order to win the game, and that's what they did. Now, Geno Smith didn't have the best game either. He had 117 yards. He had 2 passing touchdowns, but he had 3 interceptions. So there was a lot of turnovers in this game. I think the brightest part for this Raiders team is Ashton Genty finally got it going in the run game. Like, Ashton Genty had 21 carries for 138 yards and a touchdown. And he had one of them was like a 64-yard run. So, like, they finally got Ashton Genty going in the run game, which is what they really need. Like, if they want this team to be remotely successful, which is looking more and more like they're not going to, they really need Ashton Genty to get going, because you can't just depend on Brock Bowers to be your entire offense. And so having Ashton Genty in the run game is going to be a crucial part of keeping a balanced offense, especially when Geno Smith isn't having, a great game. Like, anytime you have 3 interceptions, you're not going to win that game. You're just not. Now, earlier I did put out a video, but I'll talk about it a little bit more now just because I'm on here. But the Sunday Night Football game, right away what I'll say, and I talked about this in my video, I don't think we should have ties in games, especially in professional sports. Like, that's a soccer thing. Like, soccer, sure, go ahead and have your ties, because it's just like the way you score in soccer. It's a lot harder to score in soccer, but like football, like, it was a 40-40 game between the Cowboys and the Packers, right? 40-40. You got to let someone finish out the game with a win in a situation like that. Both these quarterbacks, they both had 300-plus yard games, both had 3 touchdowns. This was like an exciting matchup in all aspects of this game. Both had successful run games as well. Josh Jacobs had 86 yards in the run. Javonte Williams had 85 yards in the run. Right? This was like such like a balanced offense game. The defenses were non-existent. I will say I'm starting to wonder about this Packers defense. Like, was it just the game plan? Honestly, for me, it was George Pickens. Like, George Pickens, he had like 134 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. He looked like a wide receiver 1 out there. He really did. I was really concerned about this Cowboys team without CeeDee Lamb, but George Pickens is proving to be someone that can really be a wide receiver 1. Like, I'm really curious to see how they can really get this duo going together when CeeDee Lamb is back. I think that's going to be really exciting. Now, on the other side, Josh Jacobs had 86 yards in the run. He had 71 yards in the pass game. Like, that's really exciting. Like, that's a great game out of him. Romeo Doubs, he was the receiver that got all 3 touchdowns for this Packers. Like, they're just like a balanced team in that offensive side. There's no like the guy. Like, when you look at this Packers offense, you don't look at them and say like, oh, like, this is the guy. They just have a bunch of guys. Like, they have a bunch of really solid contributors. Someone that can like break out any given game. And like, that's like the most exciting part about this Packers offense. The defense, again, they still need to figure things out. They looked like a juggernaut sort of defense going into the game against the Browns and even into this week's game. But they just didn't have it together this week. They're, giving up 40 points against a Cowboys team, again, that doesn't have CeeDee Lamb, would never have guessed that. It never would have been a thought in my mind. But again, the Cowboys just found a way. And the fact that it's ended in a tie is just so weird. Like, that's going to have major playoff implications for the Packers. Because, again, it's one less loss that they're going to have, but it's also one less win they're going to have in that win column. And so that's like a huge tiebreaker. That's going to be a tiebreaker situation in the playoffs. There's no doubt in my mind that is going to have an impact. And so, again, like, I'm just looking at this game, I'm thinking to myself, like, you have to find ways to have a winner in these games. Like, a tie should not be a thing. It's happened 29 times in the history of the NFL. The last time was in 2022. So it's like, you got to find a rule that changes it. I know that like fatigue and injuries are a thing that's like a fear. And I know we changed the overtime rules because of what happened between Josh Allen and the Chiefs, right? You need to give the other team a chance to retaliate and score as well. But, I mean, make a winner in this game somehow. I don't even care if it's a coin flip. I don't care like if it's just like a duel to the end with a sword. Like just do something to make it so that there's a winner in these games, because that game deserved to have that. Like it deserved to have a winner, because I'm sure Micah Parsons is leaving that game pissed off. I think he even said he's pissed about his performance. He had a sack. It was basically a no, like he didn't like Dak Prescott didn't lose many yards. He basically got to the line of scrimmage. It did save a touchdown. I will say that. Like Micah Parsons did save a touchdown, but at the same time, I don't think Micah's happy with that game. I'm sure Jerry Jones is happy with it. He's probably the only person that's happy with it, because it shows that like he didn't make a completely terrible decision letting Micah Parsons leave. So maybe that's the one person that's happy. But yeah, that's really my thought on that game. They need to change the rules. Ties shouldn't be a thing, and George Pickens is a stud. That's really the biggest takeaways I have. But that's it for me today. Again, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I am on my road to my first 100 subscribers. I would love to get to 60 today, so please hit that subscribe button. Thank you again for watching. This is Bad Takes with Bad Takes in Football, signing out.